This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, MICHAEL COVEL. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. My guest today is Porter Erisman. His documentary film is titled Crocodile in the Yangtze. It is the story of an entrepreneur, specifically a Chinese entrepreneur named Jack Ma. If you've not yet heard of Jack, which I'd not heard of Jack, that's my mistake and your mistake. Jack has assembled a net worth of over $3 billion, all started from one little internet e-commerce site. That alone should get your attention. But the reason I really wanted to have this conversation, as an American, as someone who has traveled Asia for most of 2013, Porter's film is a great window in to the cultural differences and cultural similarities that exist across these many countries of our blue planet. Even more specifically, it is the entrepreneurial manifesto. This is one of those films where you watch and you might like, you might dislike, you might have criticisms, you might have this, you might have that. I don't care. But it is that film you watch and you say to yourself, man, I can do this. I can make something big happen. And that alone, I salute Porter for making this film.
They called him Crazy Jack.
Can you see why people think it's so much hot air? You don't make any money. You've got extraordinary claims, and yet you make nothing.
But for 8 wild years, I called this former English teacher boss.
Hey, Jack, you're here.
In 1995, he started China's first internet company.
我可以建立一个中国最大的国际信息库。
你要不约的话呢，很难给你做一个很满意的回答。
I decided to join his revolution and saw behind the scenes of a rising China. The road was never easy, and many mistakes were made along the way, but it was always an adventure.
我们所有的竞争对手不在于中国，而在于美国的硅谷。我们在座的所有的人的脑袋绝不比他们长。
How are you going to grow in the face of an established company like eBay coming out with its Chinese language site?
We will win, we will make it, because we are young, and we never give up.
It is official. Yahoo agreed to pay $1 billion in cash for a 40% stake in Alibaba.com. The move is designed to catch up with eBay.
China is open the door. And internet is the best way to let the people understand what's happening outside.
This is the story, in my own words and in the most honest way possible, of what I saw and what I learned at the front lines of a revolution half a world away.
世界给了我们这个舞台，全球给了我们这个机会，为11亿人提供真正价廉物美的平台。谢谢大家。
So I have to tell you right out of the gate, I was excited after watching your film, and I'll tell you why. So here I am. I've been an entrepreneur for over a decade. Most of my success has come from the internet. An entrepreneur, what I can say that I've, the multiple 7 figures and all that kind of fun stuff, the stuff that looks nice on a resume. However, I watched the film and I'm like, I haven't done enough. There's more of an opportunity. And it's just inspiring in that sense to like, if not me, then who?
Yeah, good. Well, I made it for entrepreneurs, and that's probably why I haven't done another startup. I did this documentary instead because it's like I couldn't think how to follow that right away. It was such a crazy experience, but I'm glad that you found it inspiring, even with all the things you've done.
Yeah, because you look back and you immediately realize that if you're an honest entrepreneur, you say, where did I not put everything on the table? Where did I not give every last bit of effort? And where did I waver at some point in time? And ultimately, this internet has created this winner-take-all society, or winner-take-all opportunity. And maybe some of the guys that you really have to look up to, like the main star of your film, Jack Ma, are guys that just never wavered.
I think, that's what I learned, because I think most entrepreneurs are like medium to long term. Some are short term, but sometimes those guys flame out. But my long term view is probably like medium to long, but his is like super long. And the times when I felt, oh, maybe we should just sell to eBay, or maybe we should just, he would just keep his eyes on the long term prize. So I think one of the reasons I made the documentary is just to show that kind of determination, and that it's in the long run, it pays off, not financially, but just in terms of the satisfaction of what you've done.
Let me take a step back, though, because I think as a Westerner, as an American, coming into China, growing up in China, essentially, your formative years, and seeing all these opportunities during the dot-com bubble until today. But I think, and I should give a little background on myself in the sense that I had a chance to spend a few weeks in mainland China this year for the first time. I probably got a crash course bigger than somebody just being a tourist for 2 weeks, because I had 2 separate stages to speak to over 700 Chinese in Shanghai and Beijing both. I took the bullet train. I had a chance to sit down with many dinners with businessmen, guys from CCTV. So I got a real wide open view of things. And I'm amazed that how little us Westerners know about China to this day. It's really, when you throw yourself in like I did, even for a 2-week stretch, and I can't even imagine the insights that you've seen, it's really amazing the lack of knowledge that let's just talk about America, has for China still.
Yeah, it's that's yet another reason I wanted to make the documentary, because people, they might have one idea, the different images. Some people think China is still sort of countryside, like living in the good earth days with like peasants in the countryside. But now even more, I think people in the U.S., they overestimate China where it is, and they think the standard of living in China is better than the U.S. and it's taken over the world. And then you have other people who think it's a communist police state, other people who, and so it's hard to find a nuanced introduction to China, and probably the only way to do it is what you did, is try and see as big a cross-section as you can.
It's complicated. There is a lot of depth. There's just a lot going on. And I think one of the most interesting things I hear from people is and look, who knows, historically, 50 years from now, I'll be proven wrong. I have no idea. But the amount of conversation that goes into the threat of China. And I look at the history of China and I say to myself, hold on. These were people, and this is at the root of their society, these were people that were building walls to keep people out. And so I always find it a little bit unusual that there's, in modern day society, the threat of China, that I just don't see it I just don't feel that that's the I don't know what's the phrase. I don't feel like that's the ethos of the people to go out and, quote, threaten Americans. I think if you can win economically in that kind of competitive playing field, sure, I think that attitude's there. But I think some of the other stuff is a little overdone.
Oh yeah, I mean, China, people needed some place to put it, and so people, after the Soviet Union collapsed, they decided, oh, we need to have a new enemy like that, and maybe it's China. And so the sort of political military fear people had about Soviet Union, China's filled that vacuum. And then the economic fear that Japan had created in like the 80s, 90s, well, China has filled that. So it's funny, I almost named my documentary Gung Ho, the same name as the movie that came out with Michael Keaton about the Japanese taking over the world of, I don't know if you remember it, it's so obscure, but if you will go online and watch the trailer for this old film from like the 80s called Gung Ho, it's all about how the Japanese businessmen are taking over the car industry and going to dominate America. It's the same kind of attitude people have now about China.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's hard to explain too. And I would tell the Chinese audiences when I was there, my first impression was like, look, everyone in America likes to say, hey, we're number one. But when you're in China, Chinese look at themselves as number one. And you walk down the streets of Beijing. To me, I think one of the most interesting things is seeing a 6'3", 17-year-old teenager playing basketball with the same, quick step that you might see it as an American guy. And the size of some of the people that you see in Beijing, too, I think a lot of Americans might be thrown for a loop. This is not, these are people that there's been no lack of protein for a long time. So it's not necessarily what people think.
Yeah, that's one of the main things I just wanted to share with people from my eyes, like what was the China that I saw during my time here. And I meant to challenge people's assumptions. Like the first scene opens with this scary dragon dance through a big stadium rally, and then I end it with that same thing, and the whole point being like, oh, wait a sec, maybe this scary China is not what we thought, and also to show the transformation, in the 80s, 90s, people in China kind of looked to foreign experts, they called them, for advice on how to do business or run an economy. But now it's Chinese have actually risen to the challenge and in a lot of ways surpassed. Like in my case, I felt my colleagues surpassed my own abilities, which I don't have a problem with. They worked hard and did well. That's good. That's a good thing.
Well, let's move into your film and some of the specific lessons that you've learned. And I think one of the things that it made me think of my personal situation is that I had a chance to present for this group, Great Wisdom, DCH, and essentially they're a Bloomberg terminal competitor. So instead of China allowing, however this might have happened, instead of China allowing Bloomberg to come in and dominate, essentially a Chinese firm developed, and this firm has a 10 million plus installed user base of financial terminals, just like Bloomberg does around the world. So in many ways, I look at what Jack Ma did was instead of allowing a Western startup to come in and dominate, he said, hey, hold on, we can do this better. And if I'm reading everything that you put into your film correctly, one of the tricks of doing it better was frankly just being Chinese and having Chinese sensibilities and looking at how he did the Taobao site and that type of thinking. And I think that's part of the great story.
It's interesting. In some industries, the local competitor has an advantage over the foreign competitor because the government has built sort of a firewall around it or protected the industry to grow their own homegrown industry. But in the case of e-commerce, it really was, in my view, just a meritocracy. I mean, it was sort of with made the best team win. And what Jack and the team did with Taobao is they said, let's forget about e-commerce as we've read about it in the U.S. and let's just make something that meets the needs of the Chinese customers, fits the Chinese culture. And they basically replicated the offline way of doing business a lot of ways online, like letting people build trust online, build relationships. And so they said, forget about the U.S. model. Let's just do what's good for China. And I think you're right. That's what allowed them to grow and beat eBay, even though eBay had such better funding and so much more experience.
Was there a certain element of that too, that once the Chinese people saw an aggressive, quote, homegrown entrepreneur starting to go toe-to-toe with eBay, was there an aspect to where the people also said, beyond the usability and beyond all the things that he did to build the business, was there also an aspect that end users were like, hold on, let's give our business to our homegrown guy? Was there any aspect of that too?
The one thing that Jack and the team always clear is that it wasn't a issue of nationalism. I actually remember being in an event where someone got up and made a joke about, if the Americans come to China, they'll definitely be defeated. And he said, let's just be clear, this is not about nationalism. And I don't think it was ever played like that. It was just simply an argument, like a logical, rational argument saying we're a local team. We have a much more local site that fits the market better. And here's the evidence of that by the different features and functions we have. And so actually foreign brands in China had a lot of cachet. And in e-commerce, people might be more likely to trust a big foreign brand than a local brand, which they might see as sort of a fly-by-night operation. So being local didn't necessarily work to an advantage, but so we had to do a lot of persuading to say, here's why this local website is better than this big website. And they may have rallied a little bit around. I think the David and Goliath aspect of it, they liked from and they're intrigued by this, but at the end of the day, you're not going to keep people loyal to your site because you're a local Chinese site. You keep them loyal because you are a better site that meets their needs better.
Yeah. You spent how long you're still in China? You're still back and forth? Your home base is in Shanghai? How do you?
I guess you could say I've called China home for about 12, 13 years. But, and my home base is still Shanghai, but I actually have not spent much time here, recently. Like the last 2 years, I've spent living nomadically, just following the film around from film festival to film festival or screening to screening. And for me, it's just an excuse to travel around, talk about entrepreneurship. And it's gotten to the point where the organizers usually pay for my travel expenses. So it's taken me everywhere but China for the last 2 years.
Well, let me ask, Jack signed off on the project. He gave you permission to use a lot of the footage that used in the film. That's right. Yeah,
well, I would put it this way. He gave his blessing as I was leaving the company for me to go out and make my own independent film. Actually, I was going to write a book, and that's what I talked to him about originally, is that when I left the company, I wanted to come out and write a book about my experience, just like any number of memoirs written by former employees of Google or Amazon or eBay, PayPal. And then I started gathering footage before I left the company because I wanted to refer to it when I wrote the book. And I looked at the footage that I'd gathered, and then I was aware of hundreds of hours of footage by outsiders. So my last day at the company, I sat down with Jack, and he gave his blessing. I can't say approval or not, but he just basically said, if you want to make a documentary or write a book, it's up to you. I'm not going to be sort of for or against it. And so then I disappeared for 3 years and worked on the documentary. And sometimes in life, you don't come back and ask for approval once you've already gotten it. And so then I submitted it to festivals once it was completed. And then I recontacted Jack and told him I'd made the film that I think he'd long forgotten about.
What did he think?
The company was a little bit uneasy. There was a bit of a tense period because, they hadn't seen it yet. And 9 times out of 10, when someone leaves your company and has some materials and makes something, 9 times out of 10, that's probably some crazy expose to, say terrible things about the company. In my case, I'd had a positive experience. So once it was finished, I submitted to the festivals, and then I shared a link with him and then went and met with him face to face, just explaining my intention to show it to entrepreneurs and students. And I couldn't really sense how he felt about the film at that time. Like when I was at the company, I always knew how he felt about things that I couldn't really read him on it. I think he felt it was fair, which usually when someone does something about you, if they think it's fair, then it's maybe not too positive or not too negative, but about right. So I think that's what he felt, and he told me he wouldn't try and get in my way and that he'd live up to his promise he'd made that I could go out and do this.
I'm not really sure how to take that. I've had some interesting experiences with very powerful entrepreneurs in the past, so I'll try and read between the lines. And the film's still being shown, and so I ultimately must think that there must be a side of him that says, well, it's a pretty nice piece of press to have about me. That's someone who left the firm that felt pretty good about things.
Yeah, there are certain things that he said he disagreed with in the film, but at the end of the day, he didn't try and get in my way. I think clearly it's a positive story. And I mean, it's hard to deny that an English teacher rising to build the world's largest e-commerce company, it's hard to imagine that not being somehow a positive story. But
and look, I'm not familiar. I was not familiar with him. So, clearly he's been on stage with Bill Clinton. So call me an idiot for not knowing. But for the audience out there, there's probably many of them like me. Jack Ma, in terms of success and net worth, if people are judging that as part of the equation, is right there with the Bezos and the Zuckerbergs and guys that have just gone from zero to you know what in short order, relatively speaking. And he, based on everything he's done, it deserves to be right there in the pantheon of internet success stories.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it's fine. I always try to make clear that I'm not trying to promote him or the company, but more say what made them successful during that time period I was there. But my personal opinion, yeah, I mean, he, when you think of people like Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos, or the Google founders, I mean, I think they're all in that same class, and they have a lot of common characteristics that allowed them to succeed. And those themes are kind of seen in this film. Like, I've obviously watched Amazon closely. I've met Jeff Bezos before, met the Google founders, and the one thing they seem to have is a long-term idealism and determination that no matter what noise is out there, whether it's journalists or analysts, or that they're going to do what they think is best for the long-term view of the company and resist a lot of short-term opportunities to ultimately build something even bigger than most entrepreneurs would strive to achieve.
Were your time at the firm, the two firms, Jack, how much of this success was able to be built without interference? Because then there's an early part in the film where I think he's doing the Yellow Pages style book, and he goes to meet with a local official, and it's kind of like all this prerequisite bureaucracy nonsense of like, do you have an appointment and all this other kind of stuff that you would expect to hear. But then, years later and over time, he's, like I just said, he's right there at the upper echelon of internet success stories. How much of getting to that success involved getting other people involved, or were these companies, these two main companies, were you guys essentially on an island doing your own thing without a lot of other people, institutions, or government involved?
So you're talking specifically about like government interference?
Sure, sure.
Yeah, sometimes it's funny when I show the film outside of China. People assume like, oh, it's filmed at the internet and China. The whole thing is going to be one like battle against the government. And the interesting thing, like I think Deng Xiaoping had a famous quote where he said, when you open the door, some flies will come in. And he was basically saying, when China opens its doors to economic development, there will be some different flies or unwanted things that come in. And the interesting, with the internet, e-commerce has been able to develop pretty much uninhibited by the government. In fact, it's encouraged. There were times when, the government would, organize things to promote e-commerce and invite Alibaba and other internet companies to explain how to use the internet to trade or do business online. So I would say when it comes to economic development and business opportunities, the government pretty much opened the door wide open. Any sort of political issues or news and content, the government is really tight on. But Alibaba, for the most part, was always operating in just the e-commerce domain. And so I would say Alibaba is neither helped nor hurt by the government. There were some companies in China that tried to tie themselves to the government for e-commerce, and they would wave the flag and show photos of their meetings with government leaders and stuff. Actually, the customer is the biggest, most important person, most important relationship in e-commerce. It's more of a meritocracy. So I would say the government didn't help or hurt, but often we would move ahead with different things we were doing knowing it was in the best interest of China, and then begin to make the government more aware of it, because maybe a very conservative or scared government official would try and stop something before it actually got a chance to get off the ground.
And I wanted to follow up. We were talking about government, what I was going to really lead to is the idea that the perception, let's say an American perception of government interference in China. And I guess where I was going is that Jack Ma, the founder of these two firms, I looked on Wikipedia, it says his net worth is over $3 billion. So to assemble a net worth of $3 billion in these firms, to me says that he must have had a lot of autonomy. He must have continue and must still to this day own a significant stake in these firms. And so I guess it's an instructive, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like it'd be an instructive case for those that want to think that they're, of course, different countries, different cultures, different rules, different laws. But for those people that want to make an immediate judgment and think, well, you don't have certain freedoms to do certain things in China. Well, it looks like Jack Ma had a lot of freedom to do a lot with these companies.
Yeah, I mean, Jack Ma, he didn't have any, big government backing or any special connections. And I think that's the great thing about the internet is it's sort of the ultimate meritocracy in terms of building a business. No matter how great your government connections are, if you don't have a great product that customers love, they're just not going to come to it. And so, yeah, I think the e-commerce in general in China has grown pretty much unrestricted, other than just applying the normal sort of standards of business to e-commerce in China. And yeah, I think that the fact that he or other entrepreneurs in China have built these big e-commerce companies demonstrates that that the internet may not be quite as regulated as people think outside China. But still, having said that, if an internet company wades into politically sensitive areas like news and information or social networking, they are going to bump into the government. So I'd say 99% of the things people want to do online is free and open, but it's that 1% of things that are the sort of third rail in China that you're not going to be very successful if you take those on in a business.
Well, I might differ on the 99% in the sense of how we're categorizing things, because I definitely had my experience of not being in the Western hotels. I was okay, but getting onto Facebook was, to say the least, not easy in mainland China.
Well, that's 99% of what you want to do is different from, like in China, they have social networks like Facebook, but they are, and so those are like open and free, and you can pretty much do whatever you want. What most people want to do is just chat and meet friends and do things. But yeah, for me and you, like accessing foreign websites or Facebook,
I had no issues. I had no issues, honestly, except Facebook and maybe Twitter. But it was really just Facebook was the only real issue that I had trying to get access. But let me go to a specific example of your film. So at one point in time, you're saying a new firm, Taobao, right, is essentially going to be the eBay competitor, and you were able to do some financing, able to bring some venture capital in, but essentially you're going from a standing start against a Goliath who has now got Meg Whitman. So eBay's far enough along to where they're not some little runt or anything. They're a big mover and shaker. And I know you mentioned some examples in your film, but I would love for you to give a couple, maybe more in-depth reasons why. Why was eBay defeated by this small startup in China? Why?
Well, yeah, eBay, it's hard to, when you look back, it's hard to remember, but eBay at that time, I think, may have been the most valuable internet company in the world, and was the company held up by Wall Street and the journalists as a sort of almost like you couldn't defeat them. So, and eBay was very sort of boldly going around saying that, in any country where they had established a leadership position, they'd never lost it, because just simply the model and the network effects, they argued, was once you get the early mover advantage, no one can ever catch up. So they had a number of reasons why Taobao couldn't succeed. But at that time, at the time eBay and Taobao really started their competition, there were only about 10 million shoppers online in China out of a country of 1.3 billion. So, but eBay was claiming a 95% market share. So we said, well, even if we forgot about those 10 million, what if we just targeted the 99.9% of people who haven't started shopping online and go for that market? So, the ways that Taobao beat eBay, one was just to attract people to the site. We made Taobao free for 3 years, while eBay was charging for product listings and transaction costs. And that was just a way to let people come and try. And we basically said, okay, if you like eBay, why don't you just try Taobao? It's free. Why not give it a shot? And in China, people are hesitant to pay for something unless the concept is proven to them. So first, we made it free for 3 years. That was an important signal to the market that buyers and sellers should try Taobao. Another thing, we just did much better, we had better functions and services on the website. Like in China, people don't necessarily trust each other for business if they haven't met through an introduction or a pre-existing relationship. So we let people go and chat online. We integrated online chat so people could get to know each other a little bit better. And for our payment system, Alipay, we made it an escrow-based system where the buyer did not, or the seller did not receive the money until the buyer had said that the product was fine and the money could be forwarded to them. So there was a lot of different things that adapted to the China market that eBay, failed to innovate on. And having a better site was the key thing. And then we also just outwitted eBay in our marketing and PR as well.
And they, in terms of little things like the pricing for 3 years free, did eBay respond to these innovations, or was it just like, I mean, it seems like by the trajectory that you showed in some of the graphs and stuff in the film that it was almost like once you guys got started, it seemed like a steady progression and eBay was defeated. I mean, what did they try to do to counter?
Well, eBay, I think we backed them into a corner when we announced that we're making Taobao free for 3 years. And then eBay immediately responded by saying, actually, a site where people pay makes it a more healthy site and better site. So we will always charge.
So a cultural misunderstanding right there.
Yeah, cultural misunderstanding. They didn't understand that in China, people kind of want things for free before they start to pay. That's a cultural thing. And then that was a big one, actually, is making it free. But then once we got them, we had to make a better product. And eBay, what they did is they linked their China site to the U.S. site so that every decision that had to be made on the China site had to go through their headquarters in Silicon Valley. So if you want to change the color of a button to match the local sort of color palette of China, you would have to maybe wait overnight or a week to get approval from their standards team in Silicon Valley. So most companies know you need to localize. But what they did is they did the reverse. They actually took a pretty well-functioning local Chinese site and linked it to the U.S. platform so that it didn't work. And I've spoken to people who've left eBay that worked in the China operations, and they apparently internally all opposed this idea, but eBay's headquarters overrode it. And I think it's a dangerous mentality.
It's a pretty big mistake in hindsight, isn't it?
Yeah, it's big. And even I had heard that Meg Whitman had told some people at Alibaba once that she finally realized that was one of their big mistakes.
It's really interesting because I'm sure they had some success with that strategy with other countries, right? So they come in with their model and they establish in other countries, and even if it was heavy-handed, they won, and so that reinforced things. However, I don't even know if it takes hindsight, but when you're looking at a country that's as big as China, to think that you could apply just the same things that you might have applied to perhaps, I'm just guessing, a much smaller Northern European country and an entirely different culture a non-Western culture really seems, and I wrote this note down before I wanted to talk to you about today, which is just arrogance.
Well, that's the best way I can say it. I mean, you're based in Vietnam. You've seen American arrogance and history play out there. Like, what it really was, I would say there was still, at that time, this sort of arrogance. I even saw it with different partners we had who came into China, where they just assumed that the American way would work best here. And you're right about where the eBay model worked. I mean, it worked in Germany, where they went to Germany and the eBay model worked perfectly. But Germany and the U.S. have a lot in common, and they're at the same stage of economic development, and they're building on a very efficient existing commercial infrastructure, and their e-commerce is an evolutionary force, but in a developing country it's revolutionary because it allows people to leapfrog in the absence of commercial infrastructure. So, I think I viewed it as arrogance, and they kept making the same mistakes over and over. I mean, we could see the mistakes coming from miles away, and they still walked right into them. So it was surprising that they could do that. But I think that was the feeling at the time, is that superior technology, superior resources, and a Harvard MBA would allow you to win the China market with no problem.
Yeah, it's to give an example of something that I dealt with this spring. I quickly, once I was on the ground and I saw how friendship worked, in the sense that if you are a Western business person, you're invited in. Maybe you're going to give a presentation. Maybe you're going to talk about deals. I was in the middle of all these types of things. The little things are so important. If you can you sit and use chopsticks, are you a complete idiot who's going to ask for a fork? I mean, it comes down to the little things. And I think as Americans, we might not realize that we would use the same judgments on little things for someone coming to our country. And I think by not understanding, I had a guest on one of my podcasts recently. He reminded me, he said, look, everyone talks about GDP growth in China. And he said, hold on, they're just getting back to trend. I mean, they've been one of the biggest economies in the world for century upon century upon century. They just had a lull there for a while. And I just think this idea of not knowing, and then the arrogance is, it's telling. It's I don't know. I guess for me, I'm a very curious person. So I go to an environment like that and I see all these different experiences, and you just have all these light bulb moments going off, and you realize that it's not about one country necessarily being better than the other or this or that. It's just all people at different places, different cultures, different times, different experiences, and everyone just wants to get ahead. And anyways, I'm rambling, but I know you know where I'm coming from for you having lived there for so long.
Well, yeah, I mean, it changed my view of being here and seeing the transformation that people in China have made from, in China, people didn't have business experience because they didn't even have capitalism experience. And so it just looked like China was such a long way off, but people are really eager and energetic and absorb new ideas. So what I learned is basically to never underestimate anyone, and it doesn't matter what country or what background, and it takes time to, get out of the mentality of, being in a big American company. I mean, we actually had one period in our company where, when I was at Alibaba, is that we hired a layer of international managers from all the big multinationals, and they came into the company, and exactly like you said, like they would fly to China. You would have to first try to persuade them to fly to China because they didn't even want to come into China. They forgot who had hired who. I mean, they were used to working in Western companies that hired local staff. They forgot that the local staff had hired them. And then just kind of silly things like they would come in and it would be lunch. Everyone would get their Chinese lunchbox, and the question was like, well, where's my fork? And no, actually, I don't like this. Can I get my Kentucky Fried Chicken? So they would have to order Kentucky Fried Chicken for these guys. And then they would want to insist on flying business class back to Hong Kong. So, yeah, we learned from our own experience of trying to manage a Alibaba from China and the U.S., these two operational headquarters, and all the mistakes that we had made early, we saw eBay make when they came to the China market.
You know, as I bring these issues up too, it's not a matter of two Americans being at two different countries in Asia having a conversation looking to point a bad finger back at America. I think it's more about just everyone open your eyes and see the playing field is bigger, and don't be such a homer. You know, I'm not trying to be anti anybody. I'm just saying open your eyes.
Well, that's what I am. I mean, I guess if I'm anti anything, it's just anti-ignorance. And I could probably even say that's because I made the transformation myself, and I'm being just as critical of my prior self of coming to China and thinking I was going to be able to teach people how it's done, and then finally putting myself in the shoes of people here and realizing, oh yeah, that the team here, I've got just as much to learn from the team here as anywhere. And exactly like you said, it doesn't matter where you're from. Like entrepreneurs, the thing I've learned showing this film, no matter what your country or what, they're all sort of cut from the same cloth and have the same kind of dream to build something, improve their lives. And so I think that's the way I look at it now.
Yeah, I think us entrepreneurs are also in the minority. I don't think there's any majority of entrepreneurs out there yet.
Yeah.
But, well, listen, I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today. And where can, I've watched the film twice now, but where can, and it, like I said at the very beginning of our conversation, it's one of those things where you just watch it and it reminds me of the feeling that I had in the mid to late 1990s. But since you get it, the story goes over that hump, it goes over that kind of crash period, and then comes out on the other side to be, you know, magically successful. And that's just inspiring. And it really does. You watch it and you say to yourself, oh, I got to turn it up more. I got to go for it more. But where can anybody around the world, Porter, where can people watch the film right now?
Well, it's actually, it's funny. I went into this without any idea of how I would distribute it or what I do. I just wanted to tell the story. I thought it was inspiring, and I kind of went into it with no big master plan. So the one thing, it is available in North America on a website called films.com. They distribute to the educational market. I'm planning to release it at some point online early next year. In the meantime, actually what I've been doing is I go around and attend the screenings myself. So organizers will contact me. So sometimes people say, where can I buy this? And I say, well, if you're interested, I'll donate my time and donate the film if you are willing to cover the travel costs for me to come and give a screening to your organization or to your local market or local group of entrepreneurs. So the distribution model is very primitive, actually. It's just me showing up with the film and talking about it with a Q&A, but it should be available early next year for purchase online.
I like that, primitive, about one of the growth of one of the most successful internet commerce films in China, internet commerce firms in China, and it's primitive.
Well, my distribution strategy is primitive.
Hey, you know, one point, you know, I did a documentary film myself a few years back, and I found that Amazon, even if you don't want to sell a hard copy DVD, Amazon's digital distribution doesn't work half bad.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, I need to look into that. I actually think this is a story of the internet, by the internet, for the internet, and the best distribution to get it to people around the world is through the internet. So I'll probably look at that. It's just a matter of doing it, finding the right time early next year.
Hey, where's the best place, your main website, if they want to reach out to you and your current model of coming around and screening the film, where's the best place where people can contact you, reach out, watch the trailer, etc.?
Well, the website it's crocodileintheyangtze.com. And there's also a Facebook page. People can contact me through the Facebook page for Crocodile in the Yangtze. That's how a lot of people get a hold of me. Or my email is out there online, so people can always find that if they are diligent enough to look for it.
Well, I've said it several times. It is very inspirational. Any entrepreneur that wants to look at the world in a wider lens would be well advised to take a watch of your film. It is one of those ones you walk away and maybe if you had been an entrepreneur for a while and maybe you kind of toned it down a little bit, you watch this and you're like, oh, let's go do it. So,
well, that's what I was hoping, and it's just based on sharing what I went through personally, emotionally, as a part of being an entrepreneur. And it just so happened almost by a miracle that the footage capturing the main turning points of the story was there. And it just took someone to put it together. So I'm glad that you enjoyed it. So thanks for the nice comments.
Well, thanks, Porter. And hopefully we can catch up and meet in person somewhere around Asia in the time to come.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about a screening in Hanoi with some folks. So I may be down to Vietnam again. So thank you.
Okay. We'll talk soon.
Okay.
Take care.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.